In 636 AD of the Yarmouk battle, two titans met at the Yarmouk River, the Byzantine Empire, heir to Rome, and the rising Rashidun Caliphate from Arabia. This was more than a battle for land. It was a fight that would decide the fate of the Middle East, shattering Byzantine control and opening the door to a new Islamic era. The outcome at Yarmouk forever changed the region's culture, faith, and power, setting the stage for the world we know today. The Battle of Yarmouk was the result of decades of war that left Byzantium and Persia exhausted, their armies depleted and their people weary. Sensing opportunity, the newly united Muslim armies, driven by faith and led by skilled commanders, invaded the weakened Byzantine provinces, forcing a decisive confrontation at the Yarmouk plain. Here, two worlds collided, Byzantine tradition against Islamic ambition, each fighting for survival and the future of the region. For centuries, the Byzantine and Sasanian empires dominated the Middle East, locked in a relentless struggle for supremacy. Their rivalry drained resources and blinded them to the rise of a new force on their southern frontier. As these ancient superpowers clashed, they failed to see the storm gathering in Arabia. The final Byzantine-Sasanian war left both empires shattered, economies ruined, armies decimated, and populations divided. Victory for Byzantium came at a terrible cost, leaving its provinces vulnerable and its people disillusioned. Into this fractured world, the armies of Islam advanced, ready to reshape history. While empires bled each other dry, the Prophet Muhammad united Arabia under Islam, forging a new, dynamic power. The early caliphs channeled this unity into military expansion, sending fast, motivated armies into the weakened lands of Byzantium and Persia. Dismissed at first as a minor threat, these Muslim forces would soon prove unstoppable. The Caliphate's clashes with the Byzantine Empire began as raids into Byzantine Palestine. The Battle of Mu'tah was a sign of things to come, demonstrating the Caliphate's willingness to challenge the empire. Emperor Heraclius, celebrating victory over the Persians, received alarming news. Arab armies were invading Syria and Palestine. Underestimating their capability proved a critical error. Victories followed, including the Battle of Ajnadain, opening the region. Heraclius realized the scale of the threat. He assembled a grand army to end the invasion. The Muslim commanders consolidated their forces to face the imperial army. The empires marched towards a fateful encounter at the Yarmouk River. On the side of the Rashidun Caliphate, one name stood above all others: Khalid ibn al-Walid, a military genius. Before his conversion to Islam, Khalid had been a staunch opponent, but once he embraced the new faith, he dedicated his talents to its cause. His strategic brilliance earned him the title Saif-Ullah, the Sword of God. Khalid's journey to Syria was a legendary feat of military daring. He led his men directly across the harsh, waterless Syrian desert. This demonstrated his bold and relentlessly determined character. Upon his arrival, Khalid immediately took command of the Muslim forces. He instilled a new sense of discipline and purpose. He was a warrior chief, whose courage and tactical insight were his greatest assets. Leading the Grand Byzantine army was a man named Vahan. He was an Armenian prince and a seasoned military commander who had served Emperor Heraclius for many years. Vahan was the Magister Militum per Orientem, the chief military commander of the eastern provinces, making him one of the most powerful figures in the Byzantine military hierarchy. He was a veteran of the long and brutal war against the Sasanian Persians, and had a deep understanding of traditional large-scale warfare. He was entrusted by Heraclius with the monumental task of assembling and leading the multinational imperial army to crush the Arab invasion. This was to be the crowning achievement of his career, a campaign to restore imperial glory and secure the empire's most valuable provinces for good. Vahan was a capable and experienced general, but he faced an incredibly difficult task. The army he commanded was enormous, but it was not a cohesive unit. It was a patchwork of different nationalities, languages, and loyalties. It included elite Byzantine regulars, Armenian contingents, Slavic mercenaries, Frankish knights, and even Christian Arab tribes led by their own sheikhs. Holding this diverse coalition together was a major challenge. The various commanders often had their own rivalries and agendas, and communication was difficult. While the Byzantines had a clear advantage in numbers and heavy equipment, this internal division was a critical weakness that a clever opponent could potentially exploit. Vahan had to manage this complex command structure while planning a major battle. The strategy Vahan initially adopted was cautious and methodical. He understood the logistical superiority of his army and sought to use it to his advantage. His plan was to put pressure on the smaller Muslim force, to wear them down with skirmishes, and to cut off their supply lines back to the Arabian desert. He was in no hurry to commit to a major battle, hoping that the internal pressures and lack of supplies would cause the Muslim coalition to fracture and retreat. He believed that the sheer size and intimidating presence of his army would be enough to demoralize the Arabs. This was a logical strategy based on traditional military doctrine, but it underestimated the resilience, unity, and fanatical determination of his opponents. Ultimately, Vahan was a product of the Byzantine system. He was a competent administrator and a brave soldier, but perhaps he lacked the innovative spark of his adversary, Khalid. He was fighting a conventional war against an unconventional enemy. The pressures on him were immense. Emperor Heraclius demanded a swift and total victory, and the diverse commanders under him all had differing opinions on how to achieve it. As the weeks of standoff at Yarmouk dragged on, Vahan found it increasingly difficult to maintain discipline and unity within his vast, unwieldy camp. He was a commander caught between the expectations of his emperor and the complex reality of the force he led, facing an enemy unlike any he had ever encountered before. The armies at Yarmouk were a study in contrasts, representing different worlds and approaches to warfare. The Byzantine army embodied imperial power with armored cavalry and professional infantry. The Rashidun Caliphate's army was smaller, built for speed and endurance. Its light cavalry excelled at swift maneuvers. United by faith, the Muslim army fought with courage. They believed victory would guarantee them a place in paradise. In the summer of 636 AD, the Byzantine army marched south into Syria, a moving city demonstrating the emperor's power. The plan: trap and annihilate the Muslim army. Meanwhile, Muslim commanders, scattered across Syria, faced a critical decision. Khalid ibn al-Walid ordered a bold withdrawal to concentrate their strength. The Muslims converged on the Yarmouk River, a race against time to unite before being intercepted. Both armies arrived. The stage was set for a battle that would decide the future. The Yarmouk battlefield's geography was crucial to Khalid ibn al-Walid's strategy. The triangular plain, bordered by deep gorges, offered limited retreat options. The open north was the only accessible approach. Khalid positioned his army advantageously, with the desert behind them. The terrain favored the mobile Arab army. For the Byzantines, the geography was a trap. A single Roman bridge was the only escape route. Controlling it was key. The summer heat and dust also played a role, favoring the desert-adapted Arab forces. For 2 months the armies faced each other. Days involved skirmishes and duels. Commanders were cautious, waiting for mistakes. Vahan hoped time favored him, expecting the Muslim army to run out of supplies. Khalid used this time to organize his army into a flexible structure with a mobile reserve. Psychological warfare was intense, with champions dueling for morale. As weeks passed, pressure mounted on the Byzantines due to supply issues and internal conflicts. Vahan was forced to abandon his strategy, leading to a full-scale attack. The standoff was ending, and battle was near. Before battle, Vahan attempted a diplomatic solution, inviting Muslim leaders to a parley. He offered wealth for retreat, but Abu Ubaidah refused, offering instead 3 choices: Islam, tribute, or battle. Vahan then met with Khalid, hoping imperial splendor would intimidate. Khalid, unimpressed, repeated the same ultimatum. The negotiations failed, reinforcing the commander's resolve. The battle was now inevitable. At dawn, the Byzantine army advanced, and the Battle of Yarmouk began. The battle began at dawn. The tension was immense. The Byzantine army began to advance. It was a terrifying sight. The cataphracts moved into position. Vahan's plan was a probing attack to test the Muslim army's strength. The battle began with duels between champions. As Muslim champions emerged victorious, a roar of Allahu Akbar erupted. Vahan ordered his wings to advance, putting pressure on the Muslim flanks. The fighting was fierce. By late afternoon, the fighting subsided with partial Byzantine success. The battle was far from over. On the morning of the second day, Vahan pressed his advantage, launching a surprise dawn attack, hoping to catch the Muslims unprepared. The Byzantine left wing surged forward. The Muslim right wing began to buckle. Muslim women watching took action, shaming the retreating soldiers back into the fight. The battle reached a critical point. Khalid unleashed his counterattack. His charge was perfectly timed. The second day ended in a stunning reversal. The third day of the battle, August 17th, saw a change in Byzantine tactics. Vahan had seen how Khalid's mobile reserve had turned the tide on the second day. He realized that as long as Khalid had this elite force, he could plug any gap and counter any attack. So Vahan's plan for the third day was to try and neutralize this threat. He decided to focus his main assault once again on the Muslim right flank, but this time, he would use a massive force of archers to support the attack. His hope was that a sustained barrage of arrows would pin down the Muslim cavalry and infantry, preventing Khalid from maneuvering his reserve effectively and allowing the Byzantine infantry to grind them down. The battle began with the Byzantine archers stepping forward and unleashing a massive volley of arrows. The sky over the Muslim right flank darkened as thousands of projectiles rained down. The Muslim soldiers took heavy casualties from this relentless barrage. Under the cover of the arrows, the Byzantine infantry and cavalry advanced once more. The fighting was incredibly intense and static. The Muslims could not charge forward because of the archers, but they refused to retreat. They stood their ground, locked in a brutal, close-quarters struggle. The Muslim right center also came under heavy pressure as Vahan tried to prevent them from reinforcing the beleaguered right wing. For hours, the battle was a bloody stalemate fought in a small section of the field. Once again, the Muslim right wing began to give way under the combined assault. They were being pushed back slowly, but surely. The situation was critical. Khalid ibn al-Walid knew he had to act. He could not launch a direct cavalry charge into the teeth of the Byzantine archery, as that would be suicidal. Instead, he devised a brilliant and daring plan. He ordered his army's right flank to conduct an orderly retreat, drawing the confident Byzantines forward. As the imperial soldiers surged ahead, they became separated from the main body of their army and, crucially, from the protective cover of their archers. They were being lured into a trap. As the pursuing Byzantines advanced, their own formation began to lose its cohesion. This was the moment Khalid had been waiting for. He launched his counterattack, but not from the front. He led his mobile reserve in a wide flanking maneuver, riding hard to get around the side of the overextended Byzantine force. At the same time, the retreating Muslim infantry turned and charged back into the fight. The Byzantines were suddenly hit from the front and the flank simultaneously. The trap was sprung. The imperial soldiers, who had thought they were on the verge of victory, now found themselves surrounded and fighting for their lives. The third day ended like the second, with a failed Byzantine assault and a brilliantly executed Muslim counterpunch. The fourth day, August 18th, would be remembered with a grim name, the Day of the Lost Eyes. After the failures of the previous 3 days, Vahan and his commanders were growing desperate. The morale of the multinational Byzantine army was beginning to crack. Vahan decided on an all-out assault, throwing almost his entire army into the fight. He launched a massive coordinated attack across the entire front. His Armenian contingent, along with Christian Arabs under their own leader, Jabalah, attacked the Muslim left. The main Byzantine force of European and Greek soldiers assaulted the Muslim center and right. This was a final desperate gamble to overwhelm the smaller Muslim army through sheer numbers and force. The primary weapon of the day was the bow. Vahan deployed his vast number of archers and ordered them to maintain a constant, massive barrage of arrows against the entire Muslim line. The goal was to break the enemy's will and inflict devastating casualties before the infantry even made contact. The result was the most intense missile exchange of the entire battle. The air was thick with arrows, and the at-tat-tat of them hitting shields was a constant roar. The Muslim soldiers suffered terribly under this onslaught. So many of them were struck in the face and eyes by arrows that the day earned its morbid nickname. Despite the horrific injuries, the Muslim line held firm, their faith and discipline overcoming their pain and fear. The Byzantine infantry followed the arrow storm, crashing into the weakened Muslim lines. The fighting was more desperate and brutal than on any of the previous days. On the Muslim left flank, the Christian Arab forces of Jabalah, who were kinsmen to many in the Muslim army, fought with particular ferocity. They managed to break through the Muslim line, creating a dangerous gap. For a moment, it seemed the Byzantine plan might finally succeed. The Muslim commanders sent urgent messages to Khalid, whose mobile reserve was once again the only hope. He had been fighting on the right flank, but when he saw the danger on the left, he immediately galloped across the battlefield with a portion of his elite cavalry. Khalid's arrival on the left flank was, once again, the turning point. He led a furious charge that smashed into the flank of Jabalah's forces, who were disorganized after their breakthrough. At the same time, the commander of the Muslim left wing, Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan, rallied his men for a counterattack. Caught between two forces, Jabalah's men broke and fled. Seeing this, the rest of the Byzantine assault across the front began to lose heart. The attack faltered, and then collapsed. By evening, the Byzantines had been driven back to their camp yet again, having suffered immense casualties and gained nothing. The fourth day had been the bloodiest yet, and the morale of the imperial army was now at rock bottom. August 19th, the fifth day of the battle, was strangely quiet. After 4 consecutive days of brutal, non-stop fighting, a lull descended upon the battlefield. The Byzantine army was shattered and demoralized. They had thrown everything they had at the Muslims and had failed to break them. Their casualties were enormous, and the internal divisions within their camp were now at a breaking point. The different commanders, the Armenians, the Slavs, the Arabs under Jabalah, blamed each other for the repeated failures. Vahan, the overall commander, could no longer maintain cohesion. The Grand Imperial Army was on the verge of disintegration. They sent an envoy to the Muslim camp, requesting a truce for several days to allow for new negotiations. Khalid ibn al-Walid saw this request for what it was, a sign of weakness and desperation. He knew that the Byzantine fighting spirit was broken. His own army was also exhausted and had taken heavy losses, but their morale was sky high. They had faced down a much larger army for 4 days and had emerged victorious each time. They believed God was on their side. Khalid refused the offer of a truce. He had no intention of letting the enemy rest and regroup. He sensed that a final, decisive victory was within his grasp. He had spent the last 4 days defending and counterpunching. Now, he was preparing to switch to the offensive and deliver the final, killing blow. For Khalid, this quiet day was a precious gift. It gave him the time he needed to reorganize his forces and plan his masterstroke. He knew the Byzantine army was a wounded beast, dangerous, but vulnerable. He spent the day reconnoitering the enemy's positions and refining his plan for the final assault. His strategy would hinge on speed, surprise, and the clever use of his cavalry. He noticed that the Byzantine cavalry was positioned separately from their infantry each night, a standard tactical arrangement. He also knew the location of the single bridge over the Wadi al-Rakad, the Byzantines' only escape route. All the pieces were now in place for his final gambit. While the Byzantines licked their wounds and argued amongst themselves, the Muslim camp was a hive of quiet, purposeful activity. The soldiers rested, ate and prayed, their confidence in Khalid's leadership absolute. They knew the next day would bring the final reckoning. The calm of the fifth day was not a true peace. It was the eerie silence before a hurricane. It was the deep breath before the plunge. Khalid had weathered the storm of the Byzantine assaults, and now he was preparing to unleash his own tempest. The fate of the battle, and of Syria, would be decided on the morrow. The stage was set for the 6th and final day. The 6th day, August 20th, dawned with a new and ominous development. A powerful sandstorm blew in from the south, directly into the faces of the Byzantine army. The fine dust filled the air, stinging their eyes and reducing visibility. For the desert-bred Arabs, this was a familiar inconvenience, but for the Byzantines, it was a disorienting and demoralizing event. This was the moment Khalid ibn al-Walid chose to launch his all-out attack. He had reorganized his army overnight. The bulk of his cavalry, nearly 8,000 horsemen, were now concentrated into a single, powerful corps under his direct command. His plan was simple and brutal: to use this massive cavalry force as a hammer to shatter the Byzantine army against the anvil of the deep ravines. The battle began with a general Muslim advance. The Byzantine army, blinded by the dust and already low on morale, struggled to form a cohesive defensive line. As the Muslim infantry engaged the Byzantine front, Khalid unleashed his masterstroke. He led his huge cavalry corps in a sweeping charge around the Byzantine left flank. The imperial cavalry, caught off guard and struggling with the poor visibility, were completely overwhelmed. Khalid's horsemen smashed into them, driving them from the field and separating them from their own infantry. With the Byzantine cavalry neutralized, Khalid's force was now free to wreak havoc on the exposed infantry. With the Byzantine left flank collapsing, Khalid divided his cavalry. He sent one part to attack the rear of the Byzantine left wing, while he personally led another detachment on a desperate race. Their target was the single Roman bridge over the Wadi al-Rakad, the only escape route for the trapped imperial army. They captured the bridge, cutting off any hope of an organized retreat. At the same time, the Muslim infantry pushed forward with renewed ferocity all along the line. The Byzantine army, now attacked from the front, the flank and the rear, with their escape route blocked, completely fell apart. Command and control vanished. The disciplined legions dissolved into a terrified mob. What followed was not a battle, but a massacre. The panicked Byzantine soldiers were driven back towards the deep ravines of the Yarmouk and Alan rivers. With nowhere to run, thousands were forced over the cliffs, falling to their deaths on the rocks below. Others were cut down by the pursuing Muslim cavalry. The entire plain became a killing field. Vahan, the Byzantine commander, was killed in the chaos. By the end of the day, the Grand Imperial Army of Byzantium had ceased to exist. It was one of the most complete and decisive victories in military history. Khalid's brilliant strategy, combining the use of terrain, timing, and his elite cavalry, had utterly annihilated a vastly superior force. The Battle of Yarmouk was over. The victory at Yarmouk was absolute. For the Byzantine Empire, the defeat was a catastrophe. The path into Syria was now wide open. The myth of Byzantine superiority was broken forever. Damascus fell again, this time for good, followed by other major cities. The entire structure of imperial control in the Levant crumbled. The loss of Syria and Palestine was a devastating blow. The victory at Yarmouk secured Syria for the Caliphate. The conquest of Egypt followed with shocking speed. The loss of both Syria and Egypt was an economic and military disaster. The Battle of Yarmouk was the hinge upon which the world had turned. The victory at Yarmouk heralded a new world order. For the Rashidun Caliphate, it was transformative, catapulting the new Islamic State onto the world stage. The battle gave the Muslims immense confidence and inspired them to continue their expansion. After the battle, the region began a long process of Islamization and Arabization. Yarmouk established geopolitical and religious fault lines that would shape the medieval world. The clash of empires at Yarmouk set the stage for centuries of rivalry and exchange. It marked the end of late antiquity and the beginning of the Islamic Golden Age. The Battle of Yarmouk, fought in August of 636 AD, altered the course of history. On that dusty plain, the future of the Middle East was decided. The Byzantine Empire clashed with the Rashidun Caliphate. The victory transformed a regional Arabian power into a global force. The tactics employed by Khalid ibn al-Walid have been studied for centuries. Ultimately, the Battle of Yarmouk is a story about profound and rapid change. Understanding Yarmouk is essential to understanding the origins of the modern world.